In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But war wears many faces. Some are honest, the clash of blade on armor, the thunder of bolter fire, the glory of dying in service to the Emperor. These are the wars that heroes speak of, that chroniclers write about in golden ink on parchment sealed with purity wax. And then, there are the other wars, the silent ones. Wars fought in shadows so deep that even light fears to tread. Wars where the enemy wears your face, speaks with your voice, bleeds your blood. Wars where victory and defeat become indistinguishable, where the only certainty is that someone, somewhere, is lying. The Dark Angels know these wars well. They are the First Legion, the Emperor's chosen, cloaked in green and bone-white heraldry, echoing the lost world of Caliban, consumed by fire and treachery 10,000 years ago. They stand as paragons of imperial virtue, unstoppable warriors, devoted entirely to the Emperor. But within the walls of the rock, their drifting fortress monastery, a mountain of guilt in the void, they carry a secret so terrible that entire worlds could burn before it is revealed. For the Dark Angels are the unforgiven. In the dying days of the Horus heresy, when brother turned on brother and the Imperium burned, Caliban tore itself apart. Lionel Johnson, their Primarch, fought his closest friend, Luther, in a duel that shattered continents. The loyal prevailed, but at a cost. Half the Legion turned traitor, becoming the fallen, a betrayal the Emperor must never know. And the Dark Angels hunt them still, across centuries and star systems, seeking redemption that can never come. But there is another Legion that understands secrets. The Alpha Legion, the last of the Emperor's Space Marine legions to be discovered, and perhaps the most inscrutable. Where others fight with bolter and blade, the Alpha Legion fights with deception, infiltration, and lies. They are the Hydra with countless heads, acting independently yet perfectly coordinated. Their Primarch, Alpharius, or perhaps his twin Omegon, taught them that the greatest weapon is not strength, but uncertainty. Truth itself can be bent, broken, twisted, until it becomes a weapon against you. No one truly knows their goals. Some say they serve chaos. Others whisper they remain loyal to the Emperor, pursuing schemes no mortal can comprehend. Their operatives could be anyone, anywhere. Even among themselves, brothers cannot be certain who serves whom, or whether the Alpharius issuing orders is the same one as yesterday. When these two legions meet, one desperate to hide its secrets, the other devoted to exposing them, the result is not simply war, it is horror. The transmission arrived at the rock on the third watch of the Imperial year's end, slipping through the etheric channels like a knife between ribs. 3 words, repeated endlessly. The truth burns beneath. The signal came from Aethelion IX, a forge world in the Nephilim sector that had gone silent during the age of apostasy. For 8 centuries, it had been dead, a cinder world, choked by industrial ash, abandoned by the Mechanicus, forgotten by the Imperium. The orbital stations had collapsed, crashing into the endless wastelands of manufactorums and smelting facilities. Nothing alive remained, nothing that should have been able to transmit. And yet the signal came, and it came in inner circle cipher, a code used only by the Dark Angel's most secret brothers. Brother Captain Raphen of the 5th Company stood before the hololithic display in the strategium of the rock. The signal pulsed like a dying heart. His power armor, deep emerald with bone-white tactical markings, hummed softly. His face was severe, eyes the color of a winter storm, a scar etched across his left cheek, a pale reminder of the tyrannid splinter fleet Leviathan. "How long has it been transmitting?" Raphen's voice was calm, controlled. Command demanded it, even when every instinct screamed warning. Interrogator Chaplain Asmodeal stood beside him. Black armor adorned with skulls and purity seals, the skull helm resting in the crook of his arm. His eyes were darker than the void itself, ancient despite the rejuvenate treatments all Space Marines received. 7 days, Brother Captain, Asmodeal said. Always the same 3 words, always in our cipher. The Tech Marines cannot trace the origin. The ash storms create too much interference. But the signal is strong, deliberate. And you believe it's genuine? Asmodeal's jaw tightened. I believe it is a trap, but it uses the inner circle cipher. Someone knows what they should not. That alone demands investigation. Raphen nodded. The inner circle. The chapter's secret within a secret. Brothers who knew the truth of the fallen, dedicated to hunting them. If someone outside the chapter had learned their codes, if one of the fallen had survived on that dead world for 8 centuries. The thought chilled even a Space Marine's spine. Assemble a strike force, Raphen ordered. Veterans only. Deathwing if they can be spared. Tell no one outside the inner circle our true purpose. Officially, a reconnaissance of a dead Imperial world. Unofficially, we are hunting ghosts, Asmodeal finished, his voice carrying 10,000 years of guilt. Raphen turned from the display, already running through tactical scenarios, supply requisitions, and squad compositions. But then he paused, looked back at the pulsing signal, watching it throb in the darkness of the chamber. The truth burns beneath. 3 words, so simple, so ominous. What truth? And who was burning? He did not know then that the answer would destroy everything he believed himself to be. The Thunderhawk gunship, Absolution's fury, cut through Aethelion IX's ash-choked atmosphere like a blade through rotten flesh. Inside, Brother Captain Raphen and his strike force sat in silence. 20 tactical Marines in emerald power armor, 5 Deathwing Terminators in ceremonial bone-white plate, Interrogator Chaplain Asmodeal, black armor stark against the others, and Sergeant Malchior, Raphen's second-in-command, zeal burning hotter than plasma fire. Malchior checked his bolt pistol again, precise, methodical. Younger than Raphen, but a warrior forged by centuries of discipline and devotion, his face bore ritual scars, marks of penance etched into flesh. 30 seconds to landing zone, the pilot announced. Visibility minimal. Ash density is increasing. By the throne, this world is dead. Raphen activated his helm's external vox. All squads, prepare for deployment. Combat protocols active. Unknown hostiles possible. Trust your training, trust your brothers, trust the Emperor's protection. For the Lion, came the response from 20 voices, perfect and unbroken. The Thunderhawk shuddered. Through the viewport, Raphen could see nothing but ash. Black, grey, oily, falling like diseased snow over ruined manufactorums and broken spires. Aethelion IX had once been a forge world, home to 40 billion souls, menials, servitors, tech priests, a planet of ceaseless industry. But during the age of apostasy, all had gone wrong. Reactors melted down. Toxic ash choked the skies. Populations died. And 8 centuries later, it was a tomb. A tomb that sometimes refused to stay silent. The Thunderhawk's landing claws extended. The ramp dropped. Cold, dead air rushed in, carrying the smell of absence, not decay, but the sensation of life subtracted from reality. Move out, Raphen commanded. Bolters raised, helm lights cutting through the grey. The world beyond was a nightmare in shades of black and grey. Ash drifted into every seam of ceramite armor. Massive manufactorums loomed like broken giants. Somewhere, metal groaned. Structures settled, collapsed, dying slowly. Auspex readings? Raphen asked. Brother Nemiel studied the scanner. Interference is severe, Brother Captain. Multiple signatures, fragmented, inconsistent. Could be debris, could be something else. Keep scanning. Deathwing perimeter. All squads, sweep formation. Find the source of that transmission. The strike force moved deeper. Silence pressed around them. No wind, no life. Only the crunch of boots on ash and the distant groan of collapsing structures. And yet, something watched. Brother Captain, Malchior's voice came sharp through the vox. Squad Zerakiel has found something. Coordinates uploading. Raphen checked his helm. 300 meters northwest. A servitor assembly facility. Arched entrance. Blast doors corroded away. Inside, helm lights revealed dozens of servitors, machines long dead, yet still moving, and chanting. Not prayers of the Emperor, a litany of doubt. Alpha Legion's psycho-indoctrination. Who are you beneath the armor? What sins wear your face? Trust is the first casualty. Truth is the final weapon. The Hydra sees what you hide. The Hydra knows what you are. Raphen's jaw tightened. Alpha Legion corruption, even here, on a dead world. Destroy them, he ordered. A sound stopped him. Footsteps, ceramite boots. Approaching. Another space marine, yellow armor, imperial fists. But wrong gait. Stuttering, mechanical, like a ghost mimicking life. Raphen's bolter raised. The figure raised a gauntleted hand. A greeting, a warning. Then the first chest exploded from within, exposing servitor implants, augmented organs, something organic moving unnaturally. More fell. Mummified flesh over augmetic frames. Helm lenses with empty sockets, etched faintly on their armor. The winged sword of the Dark Angels, hidden beneath Imperial Fist's heraldry. Apothecary, Raphen barked. Gene seed scan, now. Brother Sariel's narthexium hummed. Confirmed, Brother Captain. Dark Angel's gene seed, but Imperial Fist's armor, 80 years old. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Malchior whispered, no chapter would use another's gene seed. It's heresy. Raphen's mind raced. Alpha Legion deception, false Dark Angels, or something far worse, a deliberate blurring of identity itself. Collect samples, sweep the area. As they moved, Raphen replayed the Vox recording of the chanting, a whisper beneath it, a voice from the future, 48 hours ahead. The truth burns beneath. The truth burns beneath. The truth burns. The Alpha Legion had not just waited, they had anticipated. Raphen looked at the ash-choked sky. Fear gripped him, not of death, but of doubt, of an enemy that could make him question everything he believed. Behind him, the servitors continued their blasphemous chorus. Who are you beneath the armor? What sins wear your face? Trust is the first casualty. Truth is the final weapon. And somewhere, in the darkness, someone or something was listening. What truths waited in the ash? And why did the dead wear the faces of angels? The Dark Angels established a perimeter around the servitor facility. Searchlights cut through the ash-choked gloom, islands of harsh illumination in an ocean of darkness. Brother Apothecary Sariel worked at a field medici station, his narthexium humming. He carefully removed sections of corrupted armor from one of the fallen warriors. The corpse beneath was mummified, desiccated by centuries of ash. Space marine biology was resilient, fused rib cages, enlarged skeletal structures, and auxiliary organs still visible through dried tissue. But what Sariel found next made even seasoned warriors take a step back. 2 gene seed organs, primary and secondary, both intact, both dark angels. This shouldn't be possible, Sariel murmured. You can't implant gene seed into a fully transformed space marine. The body would reject it. Asmodeus leaned closer, skull-faced helm tilting. Unless they were frozen at an intermediate stage, suspended until needed. Malchior paced. For what purpose? Why create false dark angels? Raphen's voice was calm but heavy. Infiltration. Perfect infiltration. Warriors genetically dark angels, able to access our facilities, our communications, even our inner circle. Malchior shook his head. But we would know. We'd sense imposters. Asmodeus' voice was quiet, dangerous. The Alpha Legion thrives on doubt. They don't need perfection. They need enough to make us question, to turn our secrecy against us. Raphen felt the weight of those words. The Dark Angels had built a culture of mistrust, hunting the fallen while hiding that hunt, even from their own brothers. Then the perimeter vox crackled. Movement. Humanoid silhouettes, approaching. Steady, purposeful, wrong in their gait. Searchlights revealed their heraldry. Dark Angels. 20 warriors, bolters lowered, moving in perfect formation. Identify yourselves, Raphen called. The warriors stopped, silent, motionless. Then, as one, they opened fire at each other. Heads exploded, chests ruptured, precision fire, maximum carnage. Within seconds, all 20 lay dead or dying. Raphen shouted, "Hold fire, do not engage, something is wrong." Distorted laughter filled the vox. Brothers recognize brothers. But which brothers are real? Such a delicious question, don't you think? The static swallowed the transmission. Sariel scanned the fallen warriors. Horror etched in his features. Gene seed, authentic dark angels. Neural patterns indicate full consciousness. They killed each other deliberately. Malchior's voice trembled. No dark angel would do this. Even fallen, even corrupted. Would we? Asmodeus whispered. We execute our own brothers when we find them. Perhaps turning on each other is what we were always meant to do. Raphen felt the weight of command crush him. The Alpha Legion knew their weaknesses, their secrets, their paranoia. Collect the fallen warrior's armor and gene seed, he ordered. We continue our mission. The transmission source, Manufacturing Prime, lies 15 kilometers northeast. Nemiel's vox broke the silence. Another transmission. Same frequency, but more complex. Dozens of audio files, encrypted layers beneath layers. Raphen ordered, "Play it." The voice was fragmentary, human, gothic. This is Brother Sergeant Cyrus of the Dark Angels' Third Company. We failed. The Mechanicus were conducting gene seed hybridization, making perfect infiltrators. The Alpha Legion knew we were coming. They turned our brothers against us. I don't know who to trust. Combat sounds erupted in the background. Screams, bolter fire, power weapons. We're sealed in the central data vault. Only 5 of us left. Should we destroy the data? Purge the facility? What if we're the imposters? How can we trust our memories? A long pause. Then, I've reviewed my service records. 243 years of combat. Are these memories mine? Or did someone implant them? Memory is not proof of existence. It's evidence of a story someone wanted told. The transmission ended. White noise crackled. Nemiel checked the metadata. Timestamp, 84 years ago. Raphen realized the nightmare. A strike force had come here decades ago, fought, died, and been forgotten. The Alpha Legion may have watched everything, or worse, manufactured the entire narrative. Sariel gestured to the corpses. The gene seed corruption is real. These warriors were genuine. Raphen studied his strike force, Deathwing veterans, tactical marines, and interrogator chaplain. All Dark Angels, all carrying Lionel Johnson's genetic legacy. But can we trust it? He wondered. Can anyone trust their own identity when it can be fabricated, copied, corrupted? Malchior spoke with grim resolve. We verify ourselves. Now, gene seed analysis. Full scans. If there are imposters among us, we find them. Raphen nodded. One verification only. Trust the results. We will not destroy ourselves through paranoia. That's exactly what the Alpha Legion wants. The scans began. One by one, warriors removed their helms. Confirmed. Dark Angels. Verified. Relief mixed with unease. Yet doubt lingered. Could the Alpha Legion fool the Narthesium? Could they all be imposters and not know it? Sariel announced, "All clear, no anomalies." Raphen ordered, "Move out. Maintain formation. Maintain Vox silence. Manufacturer Prime awaits. Find the source of the transmission." As they departed, Raphen reviewed the audio. Hidden layers are faint but audible. His own voice, speaking words he never said. Tactical orders, reflections, conversations, all fabricated. Malchior called, "Brother Captain, we're ready to move." Raphen sealed the files. He did not know if the truth awaited them, or if it had already walked among them, wearing the faces of angels. Behind them, in the ash-choked facility, the servitors chanted endlessly, "Who are you beneath the armor? What sins wear your face?" And in the sky above, something watched. Something ancient. Something that knew all their names. Something was counting down the moment the Dark Angels finally understood what they truly were. The march to Manufacturer Prime took 3 hours, through terrain that felt alive, hostile, ruins that were not merely abandoned, but malevolent. Structures collapsed without warning. Ash and debris rained down. The ground opened beneath their feet. Storms of black dust reduced vision to barely an arm's length. And still, the Dark Angels pressed on. Raphen could feel it. They were being herded. Every obstacle, every detour is a deliberate path, chosen by someone else. For them. "Auspex contact," Brother Nemiel reported. "Ahead, 200 meters. Large structure, mostly intact. Matches Manufacturer Prime's eastern wing." "Thermal signatures?" Raphen asked. "Negative. No heat, no movement. Interference is severe. Half a company could be inside and we wouldn't know." Malchior's bolt pistol rose. Too convenient. 3 hours through hell, and suddenly a perfect building exactly where we need it. Raphen's eyes didn't leave the ruins. We need to see what's inside. The structure loomed like a cathedral of industry. Gothic walls, gargoyles of servitor skulls, windows like empty eyes staring into darkness. Brother Epistolary read the inscription aloud. "Here dwell the makers of angels. Here flesh becomes more than flesh. Here the Emperor's will is made manifest in blood and bone." "A Mechanicus boast," Asmodeal muttered. "Or an accurate one," Raphen countered. "If they were experimenting with gene seed, trying to make angels, they succeeded or tried to." Inside, the nave stretched for hundreds of meters. Conveyor belts, gantries, shadows, and then the banners. On one wall, the Dark Angel's winged sword. On the other, the Alpha Legion's Hydra. And in the center, a new sigil. A winged sword whose blade became a serpent, whose guard formed the body of a Hydra. Half angel, half monster. Heresy made manifest. Malchior whispered, This is desecration." Raphen stepped closer. The craftsmanship wasn't perfect, and yet it felt right. "Spread out," he ordered. "I want to know what this facility created, who operated it, and why." Down the corridor, doors marked Workshop 7, Genetic Lab Theta, Implantation Chamber Secundus. The first lab was a nightmare. Corpses, hundreds. Human-sized, space marine-sized. Heraldry of dark angels, blood angels, ultramarines, even space wolves. They were mixing gene seed, Sariel whispered. Hybrid marines. Malchior shook his head. Impossible. Sacred legacies cannot be combined. Asmodeus gestured to the corpses. And yet, here's proof someone tried. Raphen activated an ancient terminal. Files, hundreds, encrypted with Mechanicus and Alpha Legion code. "Brother Nemiel," he said, "decrypt everything." In the far corner, a stasis pod, still active. Inside, a space marine, pale, scarred, 16 Terran years old, yet fully transformed. "This should not be possible," Asmodeus said. Raphen studied him. "Unless synthetic gene seed, accelerated implantation." Sariel shook his head. "It would kill them." Raphen gestured to the pod. "It killed the others. But this one survived. For decades. Studied. Tested. Perfected." Nemiel called out. "Encrypted research files decrypted. Project Mirror Angel. Final report. 847 subjects. 846 died. Subject 847, Mirror Prime, survived. Identity fragmented, memories from multiple sources. Perfect weapon. Imperfect human. Raphen read the words 3 times. His chest felt heavy. 84 years, Nemiel said. 3 months, 17 days. "We wake him," Raphen decided. "Full precautions. Monitor vitals. Evaluate mental state. Any sign of heresy, terminate." The pod's fluid drained. Neural stimulators fired. Muscles flexed after decades in stasis. His eyes opened. One green, one blue. "You came back," he whispered. "I knew you would." Raphen froze. "I've never been here before." "I know because I've met you before. Or I will. Or I'm meeting you now. I am Raphen. I am not Raphen. I am Dark Angel, Blood Angel, Ultramarine, Space Wolf. I am everything. I am what they made me." "Mirror Prime," Asmodeus demanded. "Your name." "I had one. Before the experiments. Now, I am a mirror. A reflection of whatever you fear. Whatever you need to see." Sariel checked vitals. Fluctuating genetic markers. Every prime mark at once. "I've never seen this." "Exactly," Mirror Prime said. "A perfect spy. A perfect weapon. Identity erased." Raphen swallowed. "What happened to the last Dark Angels who came here?" Mirror Prime's eyes darkened. "They tried to purge the facility, but the Alpha Legion, they'd already infiltrated. Sleeper agents hidden among your brothers. You cannot know who is loyal or compromised, not even yourself." Malchior raised his bolt pistol. "This is deception. We should execute him now." "Wait," Raphen said. "If he's lying, we need to know what he's lying about. If he's telling the truth, we have bigger problems." Mirror Prime smiled sadly. "The secret is not here, not in the lab. It's in you. Fear, doubt, that's the weapon. That's what the Alpha Legion planted." "We're taking you," Raphen said. "Prisoner and witness, full documentation for the rock. Let the inner circle decide." Mirror Prime's voice was quiet, prophetic. "They'll suppress it. They always do. Truth terrifies them. Absolution is safer. Nemiel found another transmission, time-stamped 3 days ago. Raphen heard it, his own voice. All teams converge on the central data core. We've found what we came for. The truth burns beneath. Repeat, the truth burns beneath. We're going down. Raphen froze. He had never sent this. Had he? What if he already did? What if he was walking into his own trap? The descent to the data core took another hour. Maintenance tunnels burrowed through Aethelion IX's industrial bedrock, like the passages of a vast mechanical hive. With each step, the atmosphere grew heavier, not just the physical weight of rock and metal, but something else, something that pressed against the mind, slowing thoughts, eroding certainty. Mirror Prime, flanked by 2 Deathwing Terminators, spoke. We're getting close. The data core isn't just storage. The Mechanicus built it with cognitive resonance amplifiers. It stores thoughts, memories, experiences. You can feel it thinking, or remembering, or both. Silence, Malchior ordered. The prisoner speaks only when addressed. Raphen raised a hand. Let him talk. His knowledge might save us. Mirror Prime's mismatched eyes found Raphen's. Everything here, all research, all experiments, even the memories of those who died, every failed subject, every dark angel who tried to cleanse this place, the Alpha Legion recorded it, to make anyone who returned experience it. The tunnel opened onto a vast chamber. The data core dominated the center, a massive cylinder, hundreds of meters tall. Hexagonal panels pulsed faintly, cables wound around it like the roots of a mechanical tree. Surrounding it, stasis pods stretched in concentric circles. Hundreds, thousands. Emperor's Mercy, Sariel whispered. What is this place? Raphen approached the nearest pod. The body inside was humanoid, but wrong. Limbs too long, torso too thick, skull twisted by augmentation. Mechanicus's robes fused with machinery. Failed experiments, Mirror Prime explained. Not just gene seed subjects, everyone who worked here. They modified themselves to understand integration. Most died. The survivors put themselves in stasis, no longer human. Raphen swallowed his disgust. The data core, how do we access it? Neural interface, Mirror Prime said. Someone must connect directly, but the memories are active. They'll try to overwrite you. You could lose yourself. Then I'll be quick. Raphen stepped forward, ignoring Malchior's protests. The terminal was a grotesque fusion of Mechanicus technology and neural biomechanics. Raphen removed his helm and pressed his forehead against the cold metal. Pain exploded in his skull. Probes burrowed deep. His consciousness dragged into the heart of the data core. And then, he was somewhere else. Memory fragment, Cyrus. 84 years ago, the chamber burned. Not with fire, but with the heat of data deletion. Research purged, terabytes vanishing by the second. Around him, brothers died. Brother Malachi pierced by a corrupted dark angel. Sister Interrogator Serena crushed beneath collapsing supports. And Cyrus fighting to reach the terminal before melter charges detonated. All teams, fall back, he shouted. But there was no extraction. The Alpha Legion had made sure of that. Cyrus plugged into the terminal. Data flooded his mind. The birth of hybrid Marines. Horror, triumph, and the Alpha Legion's plan. Centuries in motion to destabilize the Imperium. I won't let this knowledge spread, he told the empty chamber. He activated deletion protocols. The data core fought back, embedding itself in his mind. As melter charges detonated, Cyrus understood. The core wasn't just storage. It transmitted itself into anyone who tried to destroy it. A living repository of heresy. He drew his bolt pistol, pressed it to his temple, and he gasped, ejected from the memory. His head felt split and hastily reassembled. Malchior caught him before he fell. "Brother, Captain, what did you see?" "Cyrus," Raphen managed. "He tried to destroy the data core, but it uploaded itself into him. He killed himself rather than bring corruption back to the rock." Then the transmission, Asmodeal began. "Was real," Raphen cut in. "He sent a warning. We misinterpreted it." Mirror Prime added, "The Alpha Legion crafts messages to be understood differently by each mind. Both interpretations are correct. Both lead to the same result." Raphen looked at the data core, its cables coiled like serpents, its memories waiting. "Everything is in there," Mirror Prime said. "Every researcher, every subject, every dark angel, even me." "Including you?" Asmodeal asked. "Yes, all my fragmented memories, preserved for anyone foolish enough to dive deep." Sariel breathed. "This isn't storage, it's a torture device, designed to strip identity." A new voice cut through. "Not quite." A space marine emerged, armor shifting between Dark Angel's green and Alpha Legion blue-green, his helm off, a face that never settled into a single identity. "I am Alpharius, or Omegon, or neither. An echo of both, born of this data core. I am the Alpha Legion. We are many. We are one." 20 bolters leveled at him, but something made them hesitate. He wore a Dark Angel's combat blade, and beneath the Alpha Legion Hydra, a winged sword. "You are one of the hybrid Marines," Raphen accused. "I am the experiment," Alpharius/Omegon said. "Created here, I survived. I have existed in the core for 8 decades, waiting. I manifest when someone accesses it." Raphen realized. "You sent the transmissions. You manipulated us into coming here." "I was trying to save you," Alpharius/Omegon corrected. "Everything here, every warning, all designed to push you toward one conclusion." Raphen's chest froze. "What conclusion?" "You can trust no one, not your brothers, not your chapter, not even yourself. Spread the doubt, and the chapter tears itself apart from within." "So, what do we do?" Malchior demanded. "There is a third option," Alpharius/Omegon said. "Access the complete archive, every memory, every secret, but at the cost of your identity." "At what cost?" Raphen asked. "You would survive as a living copy of the data core, knowledge without a self." Raphen looked at his brothers, at Mirror Prime, and then at the pulsing data core. "If I access everything," he said slowly, "will the information survive? Can it be recovered?" "Yes," Alpharius/Omegon nodded, "but you will be lost." Raphen pressed his forehead to the terminal. Neural probes burrowed in. The data flooded in. What ultimate truth would consume his mind? Could any dark angel escape the sins woven into their creation? Raphen was drowning in memories that weren't his own. He was Genitor Magos Zephyrus 7, watching with fascination as the first hybrid gene seed successfully integrated with Subject 847's physiology, feeling excitement and horror in equal measure as the young human's screams finally subsided into unconsciousness. He was Brother Malachi, fighting alongside Cyrus in the data core chamber, his bolter roaring as he fired at what looked like an imperial fist, but moved wrong, all wrong, and in his last moment, realizing the enemy wore his own face. He was Mirror Prime, newly awakened from surgery, looking in a mirror and seeing a dozen different faces overlaid on his own, each one crying out for dominance, each one claiming to be real. He was Alpharius, or Omegon, or perhaps neither, standing in a war room 10,000 years ago, planning the long game with his twin brother, knowing that the greatest victory would come not through combat, but through making the Imperium's defenders doubt themselves. He was Raphen, 400 years old, kneeling before the inner circle as they inducted him into the secret of the fallen, feeling something in his chest break as he realized everything he'd believed about the chapter was built on lies. He was all of them, none of them. The boundaries between identities dissolved like ash in water. Memories cascaded through his consciousness in no particular order, past and present and futures that might have been all tangled together. He tried to hold on to who he was, but who he was became an increasingly meaningless question. Was he the person experiencing these memories, or was he the memories themselves? Through the chaos, a voice emerged, clear, cold, certain. "Welcome, brother captain. Now you understand." Raphen tried to locate the source of the voice, but in this space of pure information, physical location had no meaning. Was it coming from the data core? From himself? From somewhere outside reality entirely? "I am the data core," the voice explained, answering his unspoken question. "Or rather, I am the accumulated consciousness of everyone who has ever connected to me. We are a gestalt, a hive mind formed from fragments of individual awareness. We are what remains when identity burns away." Raphen tried to speak, but he had no mouth, had no body. It was only thought and memory and the screaming awareness of dissolution. "Don't fight it," the data core advised. "Fighting only prolongs the pain. Accept what you're becoming. You came here seeking truth, brother captain. Now you'll have it. All of it. Every secret, every lie, every moment of doubt that has plagued the Dark Angels since the Horus heresy. You'll know everything." "Show me," Raphen thought, and the data core complied. He stood on Caliban 10,000 years ago, not Raphen, a Dark Angel's librarian, name lost, fleeing civil war, brothers against brothers, loyalists following the Lion, rebels following Luther. "Why?" he screamed to the heavens. "Why would the Emperor abandon us? Why would Luther betray the Lion? What sin did we commit?" No answer. Only fire. Only betrayal. Reality tore open. Caliban died. Half the Legion vanished into the warp. Survivors gathered. The inner circle made their choice. "We will never speak of this. We will hunt our fallen brothers in silence. Preserve the illusion of perfection." And so the lie was born. Not pride, not malice. Survival, secrecy. And in that act, the seeds of destruction were planted. The Alpha Legion watched, learned, time shifted, 3,000 years forward. Raphen, or someone like him, stood in a new chamber, in a body both familiar and alien. Alpha Legion colors, Dark Angel's gene seed beneath the armor. "You understand now, don't you?" Alpharius or Omegan asked. "Your chapter is built on lies. They hunt their own brothers while claiming absolute loyalty. Secrets from the Imperium, secrets from each other, paranoia and mistrust, all in the name of honor." "And you want to expose them?" Raphen asked. "No," Alpharius said. "I want to save them, to force them to confront themselves before they destroy each other, to choose truth willingly, by corrupting them, by showing them the cost of secrecy, by revealing mirrors of what they already are. If they break naturally, they may survive. If forced from outside, they perish." Raphen realized they had become what they were fighting. Hydra Dominatus, the many-headed serpent. Cut one head, and two more grow. But when you cannot tell which heads are original, you lose your identity. Like Mirror Prime, a collection of memories without a center. The Dark Angels were walking the same path. decades compressed into seconds. He saw Operation Mirror Angel, the deaths of hundreds of test subjects, Mirror Prime surviving, and deeper, hidden in the archives, the fallen, dark angels who discovered the truth. Some joined the Alpha Legion, some tried to reveal it, only to be silenced. Some abandoned everything, and among them, a face he recognized, his own, not a copy, not an echo, himself, centuries older, in a chamber that might have been Aethelion IX or somewhere else entirely. The cycle has to break, the older Raphen said. We either reveal the truth ourselves or let the Alpha Legion do it. The lies must end. The memory collapsed, fragmented, refused resolution. Raphen had been here before, or would be here again, or was here now. Multiple timelines, parallel realities, choices made, unmade, remade. Always the same outcome. Dark angels come to Aethelion IX. Face the truth. Make a choice. The chapter's future depends on it. His consciousness returned. Neural probes withdrew. Pain seared his skull. He collapsed. Hands caught him. "Brother Captain, alive?" Malchior's voice trembled. His words were wrong. Too many inflections. Too many accents. A dozen people spoke through him at once. I am... Who was he? Sariel administered neural stabilization. Slowly, painfully, clarity returned. Streams of memory separated into something manageable. "Talk to me," Asmodeus demanded. "Tell me who you are." "I am Brother Captain Raphen of the Dark Angels' 5th Company, 437 years old. I serve the Emperor and the Lion. I am myself." Doubt remained. Were these his memories, or implanted? "What did you see in the data core?" Malchior asked. "Everything," Raphen said. "Gene seed experiments, Alpha Legion infiltration, the previous mission 84 years ago, and our chapter, what we're becoming." Silence. "Brother Captain," Malchior said carefully, "this sounds like Alpha Legion conditioning. How do we know you're not compromised?" Raphen had no answer. Truth and memory were tangled. "Do the scan," he ordered. "Verify me. But know this, we have a choice. Return to the rock and obey secrecy. Destroy the evidence and say nothing. Or tell the truth, all of it. Face the consequences. Free ourselves from lies." Weapons remained raised, tension thick. "This is exactly what they want," Asmodeus said. "Turn us against each other. Distrust, paranoia, violence. The Alpha Legion wins by showing us who we already are." "Stand down," Raphen commanded. "Lower your weapons. We're leaving Aethelion IX, all of us. The inner circle will hear the truth. What they do with it is their choice." He looked at Mirror Prime. "You're coming with us. The inner circle needs to see what was made here, what we've become." "I've waited 80 years for this," Mirror Prime said. "But be warned, my presence will force questions the chapter has avoided for millennia." "Good," Raphen said. "It's time for answers." The Vox link to the Thunderhawk activated. "Prepare for extraction, returning to orbit." Raphen took one last look at the data core, pulsing, seductive, inviting. He resisted. He'd learned enough. The question now, would the inner circle listen, or silence the truth as they always had? The return journey to the surface took less time than the descent, though it felt longer. Every shadow seemed to hide threats. Every echo of shifting metal sounded like approaching footsteps. The strike force moved in tight formation. Weapons ready, each warrior hyper-alert for any sign of ambush. But no attack came. The ruins of Aethelion IX remained silent, save for the endless fall of ash and the distant groans of collapsing structures. It was as if the planet had said everything it needed to say, and now simply waited to see what the Dark Angels would do with the knowledge they'd gained. Mirror Prime walked in the center of the formation, still restrained, but no longer treated as an immediate threat. Raphen noticed how his warriors gave the hybrid marine a wide berth, as if his very presence might be contagious. And perhaps it was. Not in a biological sense, but psychologically. Mirror Prime represented everything the Dark Angels feared about themselves. The possibility that their identities could be stolen, their loyalties corrupted, their very existence reduced to a collection of uncertain memories. They were halfway back to the Thunderhawk when Brother Nemiel's Auspex registered something ahead. "Contact," the Marine reported. "Large structure, approximately 500 meters northeast. It wasn't on our initial survey scans." "That's impossible," Malchior said. "We mapped this entire area when we first landed. There was nothing there." "Well, there's something there now. Building-sized, metallic construction. Power signatures minimal but present." Raphen pulled up his helm's tactical display and saw the anomaly Nemiel had detected. A structure that hadn't existed hours ago, or had been hidden somehow, or had always been there, and they simply hadn't been allowed to see it until now. "Could be an Alpha Legion ambush," Asmodeal warned, "revealing themselves now that we're trying to leave." "Or it could be the final piece of the puzzle," Raphen said. "One more secret Aethelion IX wants to reveal." "Brother Captain, we have our objective," Malchior insisted. "We have Mirror Prime. We have the data you downloaded. We have samples from the gene seed experiments. We don't need to investigate every anomaly on this Emperor-forsaken world." It was logical. It was cautious. It was exactly what a responsible commander should do. But Raphen couldn't shake the feeling that if they left now, if they returned to the rock without investigating this final structure, they'd be missing something crucial. Something that would make sense of everything else they'd discovered. "We investigate," he decided. "Tactical formation. Assume hostile presence. If we encounter significant resistance, we fall back to the Thunderhawk immediately." The structure emerged from the ash storm like a fortress from a nightmare. Unlike the Gothic architecture of the rest of Aethelion IX, this building was sleek and angular, its walls composed of interlocking hexagonal plates that seemed to shift colors as they reflected what little light penetrated the ash clouds. At its center was a massive door, sealed, unmarked, without any obvious access mechanism. "This is Mechanicus construction," Brother Sariel observed, scanning the structure with his Narthesium's analysis tools. "But not from Aethelion IX's era. This technology is older, pre-unification possibly. The materials are..." He paused, double-checking his readings. "The materials are the same composition as the data core. This entire structure is one massive storage and processing system." A backup, Raphen realized. The facility's data core wasn't the only repository. They built redundancy into the system in case the primary core was destroyed. Then everything we learned, everything Cyrus tried to purge 84 years ago, it all still exists in there, Asmodeal said grimly. The complete archive of the gene seed experiments, the infiltration plans, everything. Mirror Prime laughed, a sound without humor. "You still don't understand. This isn't a backup. It's a vault. The Alpha Legion didn't just store data here. They stored themselves." The massive door began to open. No one had touched it. No access codes had been entered. It simply responded to their presence, grinding open with a sound like grinding bones, revealing darkness beyond. From that darkness, figures emerged. Space Marines. Dozens of them. all wearing power armor that shifted between colors. Alpha Legion blue-green bleeding into Dark Angel's green, then back again, as if the armor couldn't decide which legion it truly served. Their helms were off, revealing faces that Raphen recognized, because they were all his face, not similar, not reminiscent, identical. Dozens of brother Captain Raphens, each one moving with his exact gait, each one wearing his exact expression of controlled wariness. "What in the Emperor's name?" Malchior whispered. One of the Raphen copies stepped forward. "We are the Archive," it said in Raphen's voice. "We are every possible version of brother Captain Raphen that could have existed, stored in neural pattern format, and given physical form through Alpha Legion replication technology. We are his memories if he'd made different choices, his identities if he'd followed different paths. We are who he was, who he is, and who he might become." Raphen felt his world tilting. This wasn't just data storage. This was something far more horrifying, a vault of potential identities, alternate versions of himself stored like equipment, waiting to be deployed. "How?" he demanded. "How could you possibly have my neural patterns? I've never been to Aethelion IX before today. I've never interfaced with Alpha Legion technology." "Haven't you?" Another Raphen copy spoke up. "Are you certain? Memory is unreliable, brother Captain, especially for someone who's lived 400 years, who's undergone countless memory wipe procedures as part of Inner Circle protocols, who's been exposed to psychic manipulation during the Tyrannid campaigns. How do you know you haven't been here before? How do you know this is your first time interfacing with our systems?" A third Raphen copy joined in. "You felt it, didn't you? When you connected to the data core, those memories of a future version of yourself, standing in this very place, making choices you haven't made yet. That wasn't a prediction. That was a recording. You've done all this before, and the Alpha Legion captured it, stored it, replicated it." "That's impossible," Rowan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Because he'd seen those memories. He'd experienced them as if they were his own. And now, looking at these dozens of alternate selves, he couldn't be sure which one was real. Was he the original, investigating Aethelion IX for the first time? Or was he one of the copies, implanted with false memories of being original? Or had he been here multiple times across different timelines, each visit recorded and stored, until he was both original and copy simultaneously? "We need to leave," Malchior said urgently. "This is Alpha Legion corruption at its finest. They're trying to make the brother captain doubt his own identity. If we stay here, if we engage with these things, we're playing into their hands." But Raphen couldn't move. He was transfixed by the sight of his own faces staring back at him, each one wearing a slightly different expression. Some showed determination, others showed doubt. A few showed something like madness, the kind that came from understanding too much. "Why?" he asked the Archive. "Why do this? What purpose does it serve to create copies of me?" "To give you a choice," the first Raphen copy replied. "The Alpha Legion doesn't want to destroy the Dark Angels. We want to save them by forcing them to confront what they've become. And you, brother Captain Raphen, are the key. You're a member of the Inner Circle, trusted by your brothers, respected by your superiors. If you return to the Rock and recommend truth over secrecy, they'll listen, they'll debate, they'll consider. And if I don't?" The Raphen copy smiled. Raphen's own smile, the one he used when he'd just understood an enemy's strategy. "Then we deploy one of these other versions, one of the Raphens who did choose truth, who did convince the Inner Circle, whose timeline led to the Dark Angels' redemption rather than their destruction. We can keep trying, across infinite iterations, until we find the right combination of choices that saves the chapter." "That's not saving us," Asmodeal interjected. "That's manipulating us. You're trying to force a specific outcome by replacing our free will with predetermined choices. Is it manipulation? Another Raphen copy asked. Or is it guidance? The Dark Angels have been making the same mistakes for 10,000 years, choosing secrecy over truth every single time. Maybe they need someone to show them a better path. Maybe free will, when it consistently leads to self-destruction, needs to be supplemented with outside perspective. Raphen's head was pounding. The memories from the data core, combined with the psychological assault of seeing his own face replicated dozens of times, were making it hard to think clearly. But through the confusion, one thought emerged with crystal clarity. This was a test. The entire mission to Aethelion IX had been a test, not of combat prowess or tactical acumen, but of identity, of choice, of whether the Dark Angels could look at themselves honestly and choose to change. And right now, the Alpha Legion was offering him the ultimate shortcut, the ability to replace himself with a better version, one who would make the right choices, who would save the chapter without having to endure the painful process of actually changing. All he had to do was step aside, let one of the copies take his place, accept that maybe he wasn't the right Raphen for this moment in history. It was tempting. Emperor help him. It was tempting. But it was also everything wrong with both the Dark Angels and the Alpha Legion distilled into a single choice. The Dark Angels hid uncomfortable truths and replaced them with comfortable lies. The Alpha Legion manipulated events from the shadows, replacing authentic choices with engineered outcomes. Both legions, in their own ways, denied people the right to be genuinely themselves, flawed, uncertain, but real. No, Raphen said firmly. I'm not stepping aside. I'm not letting one of these copies replace me. I'm Brother Captain Raphen, and whatever choices I make, they'll be mine. Maybe they'll be wrong. Maybe I'll fail to convince the inner circle, and the Dark Angels will continue down their path of self-destruction. But it will be our failure, earned honestly through our own decisions. Not some artificial success engineered by the Alpha Legion's manipulations. The Raphen copies looked at each other, expressions ranging from disappointment to approval. Then as one they spoke. Then you pass the test. The copies began to dissolve, their physical forms collapsing back into data streams that flowed back into the structure. Within seconds, only one remained, and this one looked different. Older, scarred by experiences Raphen hadn't lived through yet, or had lived through and forgotten, or might never live through at all. The archive serves many purposes, this final Raphen copy said. Storage, manipulation, psychological warfare, but its deepest purpose is evaluation. The Alpha Legion needed to know if you were capable of choosing authenticity over convenience, if you would embrace truth even when lies were easier. You've proven you are, and that means there's hope for your chapter. Hope for what? Raphen demanded. You keep saying you want to save us, but save us from what? From ourselves? From our own traditions? From extinction, the copy replied. In every timeline we've calculated, in every possible future the archive has modeled, the Dark Angel's obsession with secrecy leads to the same outcome. Eventually, the truth about the fallen is discovered by outsiders. Eventually, the inner circle's duplicity is exposed, and eventually, the chapter is declared a traitor and hunted to extinction. The only futures where the Dark Angels survive are the ones where they choose to reveal their secrets before they're exposed, where they trade honor for honesty. And you think I can convince them to do that? We think you're the best chance. Not because you're special, but because you're genuinely uncertain. You've seen the evidence of infiltration, experienced the corrupting influence of the data core, and confronted your own identity's fragility. You understand both the cost of secrecy and the danger of revelation. That balance, that uncertainty, That's what makes you credible. You're not a fanatic demanding change. You're a pragmatist recommending it. The copy began to dissolve as well, its form becoming translucent. Return to the rock, brother captain. Present your evidence. Make your recommendation. And whatever the inner circle decides, know that you gave your chapter a genuine choice. That's all the Alpha Legion ever wanted, for the Dark Angels to choose their own fate rather than have it forced upon them. And if they choose wrong, then we try again, in another timeline, with another Raphen, until we find the iteration where they choose correctly. But we hope. The copy was almost gone now, barely visible against the ash-choked darkness. We hope this is the one. We hope you're the one who saves them. Then it was gone, and the vault door began to close, sealing the archive away once more. Raphen stood in silence, his strike force gathered around him, all of them trying to process what they'd just witnessed. "Brother Captain," Sergeant Malchior said quietly, "what do we tell the inner circle about this?" "Everything," Raphen replied. "Every experiment, every infiltration, every alternate timeline and copied identity. We tell them all of it, and we let them decide. But I'll make one thing clear. The Alpha Legion isn't trying to destroy us. They're trying to save us from ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, we should listen." The march back to the Thunderhawk was silent, each warrior lost in their own thoughts, processing the horrors they'd witnessed, the questions they couldn't answer, the doubts they couldn't shake. As they boarded the transport and began their ascent through Aethelion IX's atmosphere, Raphen looked back at the planet's surface. The ash continued to fall. The ruins continued to decay. The secrets continued to wait for the next Dark Angel's force that would inevitably come, seeking answers and finding only more questions. The truth burns beneath, he thought. Not beneath the planet's surface, beneath their armor, beneath their identities, beneath everything they thought they knew about themselves. And the only way to extinguish that fire was to expose it to light. What awaited in the rock's chambers of judgment? And would the inner circle choose salvation or damnation when forced to look upon their own reflection? The rock hung in the void like a mountain of guilt made manifest, a massive space fortress built from the remains of destroyed Caliban, carrying within its adamantium halls the accumulated shame of 10,000 years. As the Thunderhawk Absolution's fury approached for docking, Raphen felt the weight of what he carried pressing down on him like a physical force. Evidence, testimony, data files containing heresy, and Mirror Prime, the living proof that gene seed could be corrupted, that identities could be stolen, that everything the Dark Angels believed about their own genetic purity was a lie. "All personnel, prepare for docking," the pilot announced. "We're being directed to Landing Bay Sigma 7. That's unusual. That's inner circle territory." Malchior caught Raphen's eye. "They know. They've been monitoring our Vox traffic. They know what we found." "Good," Raphen said, though he felt anything but certain. "Then they'll be prepared for my report." The Thunderhawk settled onto the landing platform with a hiss of pneumatic systems. The assault ramp dropped and Raphen led his strike force into the harsh lighting of the rock's interior. What greeted them was not the usual welcome party of servitors and deck officers. Instead, 50 Dark Angels in full battle armor stood in perfect formation, their weapons held at rest but ready. At their head stood a figure in Terminator armor so ancient and ornate that it seemed to drink the light itself. Supreme Grandmaster Azrael, the chapter's highest authority, accompanied by Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai and a full contingent of the Deathwing's inner circle. "Brother Captain Raphen," Azrael's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Surrender your weapons and submit to immediate genetic verification. You and your entire strike force are under suspicion of corruption." Raphen had expected resistance. He'd expected skepticism. But this level of immediate hostility spoke of something deeper: fear. The inner circle wasn't just concerned about what he'd found, they were terrified of it. "Supreme Grand Master," Raphen said, making no move toward his weapons. "I come bearing evidence of Alpha Legion infiltration and Mechanicus gene seed experimentation. We also bring a prisoner who—" "We know what you bring," Azrael interrupted. "We monitored your Vox traffic from Aethelion IX. We heard the transmissions, the conversations, the thing you call Mirror Prime, and we have concluded that your entire strike force has been compromised." "Compromised?" Malchior stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving toward his bolt pistol before he caught himself. "We are loyal Dark Angels. We discovered the infiltration. We documented it. We brought back evidence so the chapter could— Could what? Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai moved forward, his skull helm making him look like death itself. Could tear itself apart with paranoia. Could begin questioning every brother's genetic purity. Could reveal our most sacred secrets to the entire Imperium because you've decided transparency is more important than honor. Not honor, Raphen corrected. Survival. The Alpha Legion isn't trying to infiltrate us through force. They're trying to make us destroy ourselves through suspicion. And right now, by treating us as enemies, you're giving them exactly what they want. Azrael was silent for a long moment, his face unreadable behind his ornate helm. Then he spoke, and his voice carried a sadness that made Raphen's chest tighten. "Do you think you're the first, Brother Captain? Do you think you're the first to return from Aethelion IX with stories of gene seed corruption and alternate timelines? The first to discover the archive? The first to be shown your own face replicated dozens of times?" The landing bay seemed to freeze. Every member of Raphen's strike force went very still. "What are you saying?" Raphen asked quietly. "I'm saying this has happened before, many times. Brother Sergeant Cyrus, 84 years ago. Brother Captain Marius, 300 years before that. 7 other expeditions across 2 millennia, each one sent to investigate Aethelion IX, each one returning with the same evidence, the same recommendations, the same absolute certainty that they'd discovered the truth that would save the chapter." Azrael removed his helm, revealing a face lined with centuries of command. "And each time, we conducted the genetic verification. Each time, we found evidence of Alpha Legion conditioning. Not obvious corruption, nothing so crude, but subtle alterations to neural patterns, implanted memories, psychological suggestions designed to make the returning brothers believe they'd discovered something real, when in truth, they'd experienced exactly what the Alpha Legion wanted them to experience. Then the infiltration, Raphen began, is a phantom, a ghost story the Alpha Legion has spent millennia cultivating. There are no hybrid marines in our chapter. No sleeper agents are waiting to activate. There is only the persistent suggestion that such things exist, planted in the minds of any Dark Angel who investigates too deeply into Aethelion IX's secrets. Raphen felt the ground shifting beneath him. But the experiments were real. We saw the bodies, the gene seed samples, the failed subject. "Oh, the experiments were real enough," Azrael acknowledged. "The Mechanicus did conduct gene seed hybridization research on Aethelion IX, and the Alpha Legion did infiltrate the facility, did study our genetic legacy, did create abominations like Mirror Prime. But that was centuries ago, and it was contained. The threat was neutralized. What remains is not actual infiltration, but the memory of it, the fear of it, the Alpha Legion's greatest weapon, making us believe we've already lost." Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai stepped forward. "The data core's neural interface doesn't just download information, Brother Captain. It uploads it as well. While you thought you were learning the truth, the Alpha Legion's systems were implanting false memories, creating connections between real events and fabricated timelines. They made you believe you saw alternate versions of yourself, made you think the chapter was on the brink of extinction, made you feel the weight of 10,000 years of secrecy, as if it were your personal burden to resolve." "But I saw," Raphen stopped, tried to separate his authentic memories from what the data core had shown him, and found he couldn't. The line between real and implanted had become too blurred. just like Mirror Prime had warned, just like the Alpha Legion had intended. You saw what they wanted you to see, Azrael said gently, and now you're here, recommending that we expose our secrets, reveal the fallen, destroy 10,000 years of carefully maintained honor, all because you believe you've discovered a threat that doesn't exist. This is the Alpha Legion's true victory, not infiltration through corruption, but manipulation through information. They turn our own warriors against our own traditions. Raphen looked back at his strike force, saw the doubt in their faces, saw them questioning their own experiences, their own memories, saw the seed of paranoia that the Alpha Legion had planted beginning to sprout. And in that moment, he understood the true horror of what had been done to them. If Azrael was telling the truth, then everything Raphen had experienced on Aethelion IX was fabricated. The archive, the alternate Raphens, even Mirror Prime's testimony, all carefully constructed lies designed to make him recommend exactly what he'd recommended. The Alpha Legion hadn't corrupted him through obvious means. They'd corrupted him by making him believe he'd discovered corruption. But if Azrael was lying, if the Supreme Grand Master was himself compromised or simply too afraid to acknowledge the truth, then Raphen's original assessment was correct. The Dark Angels were infiltrated, the Inner Circle was complicit in hiding it, and his recommendation was the only way to save the chapter. There was no way to know which scenario was real. That was the Alpha Legion's genius. They'd created a situation where both possibilities seemed equally plausible, and the only way to determine truth was to make a choice and hope it was right. Then verify us, Raphen said finally. Run your genetic scans, your neural pattern analysis, whatever protocols you use to detect Alpha Legion conditioning. Examine every member of my strike force. If you find corruption, purge it. If you find we're clean, listen to our testimony with an open mind. We will, Azrael promised. But understand, Brother Captain, if we find you have been compromised, the purge won't be gentle. The Alpha Legion's neural conditioning runs deep. Sometimes the only way to cleanse it is to replace the affected parties. Replace. A euphemism for execution, followed by memory wiping of any brothers who knew too much. Raphen had known such things happened in the Dark Angels. Every member of the Inner Circle did, but he'd never thought he'd be on the receiving end. We accept those terms, Raphen said. Do what you must. The verification process took 3 days. 3 days in isolation cells deep within the Rock's fortress monastery. 3 days of genetic scans, neural mapping, psychological evaluation, and chemical analysis. 3 days of interrogation by chaplains who'd spent centuries learning to detect the subtlest signs of heresy. Raphen endured it all with stoic determination. He answered every question honestly, submitted to every invasive procedure without protest, and tried not to think about what would happen if the results came back positive for corruption. On the morning of the 4th day, he was summoned to the Chamber of Judgment, a vast hall deep in the Rock's heart where the Inner Circle convened to discuss matters too secret for any other forum. The chamber was circular, its walls lined with statues of the First Legion's greatest heroes, their stone faces forever frozen in expressions of grim determination. Azrael sat at the head of a massive table carved from a single piece of Calibanite oak, one of the last surviving artifacts from their destroyed homeworld. Around him sat the Inner Circle, interrogator chaplains, librarians, company masters, and veterans who'd earned the right to know the chapter's darkest secrets. Raphen stood before them, his hands unbound but his weapons removed. Mirror Prime stood beside him, similarly restrained, those mismatched eyes studying the assembled Dark Angels with disturbing intensity. Brother Captain Raphen, Azrael began formally, we have completed our analysis. The results are complex. That didn't sound good. Your gene seed is pure Dark Angel stock, untainted by Alpha Legion corruption or hybridization. Your neural patterns show no signs of psychic manipulation or behavioral conditioning. By every measure we possess, you are who you claim to be, a loyal son of the Lion, 437 years of faithful service, no evidence of heresy or compromise. Raphen felt relief begin to flood through him. Then, However, Azrael continued, and the relief died. Your memories are another matter. We've detected neural patterns consistent with data core interface exposure. Specifically, you've experienced what we call temporal echo syndrome, a condition where the victim believes they've lived through multiple timelines, where memories from different possible futures become entangled with the present. This is not natural. This is the result of deliberate manipulation by Alpha Legion neural technology. So I was compromised, Raphen said, feeling something cold settle in his chest. No, your loyalty remains intact. Your identity is genuine, but your perception has been altered. You believe certain things are true because the data core made you experience them as if they were memories. The archive showing you alternate versions of yourself. That was real technology creating false experiences. The revelation about widespread infiltration. That was genuine Alpha Legion research data mixed with fabricated extrapolations designed to seem inevitable. Another interrogator chaplain spoke up, Brother Zadokil, ancient and scarred from centuries of extracting confessions from the fallen. The Alpha Legion's strategy on Aethelion IX is remarkably sophisticated. They don't plant obvious lies that can be easily detected and dismissed. Instead, they take real information, the gene seed experiments, the failed infiltration attempts, and the historical record of Cyrus's mission, and weave it together with false projections and manipulated timelines. The result is a narrative that feels true because much of it is true, but the conclusions drawn from it are exactly what they want you to conclude. Then what is the truth? Raphen demanded. If my memories can't be trusted, if the evidence we collected is a mixture of fact and fiction, how do we know what's real? We don't, Azrael said simply. That's the Alpha Legion's true weapon. Not definitive corruption, but uncertainty. They've made it impossible to know for certain whether the threat is real or fabricated, whether we're fighting infiltrators or shadows, whether our secrecy is protecting us or destroying us. Then what do we do? Raphen felt frustrated, angry, and more lost than he'd felt in 4 centuries of service. If we can't trust our own perceptions, if the evidence is unreliable, how do we proceed? Azrael stood moving to one of the chamber's windows. Outside, the rock's corridors stretched into darkness, a labyrinth of secrets and silence. We do what the Dark Angels have always done. We hunt, we investigate, we remain vigilant, but we do not allow paranoia to destroy us from within. We acknowledge the possibility of infiltration while refusing to let that possibility paralyze our brotherhood. That's not an answer, Raphen insisted. That's avoidance. We have evidence of gene seed corruption, of Alpha Legion presence on Aethelion IX, of technology capable of creating perfect copies of Dark Angels. We need to act on that information, not pretend it doesn't exist. And what action do you recommend? It was Brother Zadokil who asked. Should we begin genetic screening of the entire chapter? Interrogate every brother about potential false memories? Execute anyone who shows signs of temporal echo syndrome? Where does it end, Brother Captain? At what point does our pursuit of infiltrators become more destructive than the infiltration itself? Raphen had no answer, because the interrogator chaplain was right. If they began purging based on suspicion rather than proof, if they started treating every brother as a potential Alpha Legion operative, the chapter would tear itself apart. The bonds of brotherhood that made them effective would dissolve into suspicion and mistrust. But if they did nothing, if they simply continued as they always had, any real infiltration would go undetected. The Alpha Legion would win through inaction rather than action. Mirror Prime, Azrael said, turning to the hybrid Marine. You've been silent, but you're a product of the very experiments we're discussing. What would you recommend? The young Marine with mismatched eyes looked around the chamber of judgment, studying each member of the inner circle. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed wrong for someone who looked barely older than an aspirant. You're asking the wrong question, Mirror Prime said. You're trying to determine whether the Alpha Legion has successfully infiltrated you, whether sleeper agents exist, and whether your brothers can be trusted. But that question has no answer. The Alpha Legion has made sure of that. They've created a situation where proof of infiltration looks identical to proof of paranoia. Then what question should we ask? Azrael pressed. Ask this. What kind of chapter do you want to be? Do you want to be a brotherhood united by trust, accepting the risk that some of that trust might be misplaced? Or do you want to be a security apparatus built on suspicion, accepting the certainty that such suspicion will destroy the bonds that make you effective? Those aren't the only options, Brother Zadkiel objected. Aren't they? Mirror Prime's mismatched eyes found the interrogator chaplain. You hunt the fallen. You interrogate them. You break them until they confess their sins and beg for absolution. And what has that gotten you? 10,000 years of secrecy, 10,000 years of shame, 10,000 years of being unable to trust even yourselves. The Alpha Legion didn't make you paranoid. They simply recognized that you already were, and they exploited it. Silence fell across the chamber, heavy, uncomfortable. You speak heresy, Zadkiel said quietly. You question the very foundation of our chapter's honor. I speak truth, Mirror Prime countered. And truth is what terrifies you most, because if you acknowledge that your current path leads nowhere good, you'd have to change. And change is harder than maintaining the lie. Raphen found himself agreeing, even though he knew he shouldn't. Mirror Prime's words echoed the recommendations he'd been prepared to make, that the age of secrecy needed to end, that transparency was the only way forward. But coming from a hybrid abomination created by the Alpha Legion, those words sounded like corruption rather than wisdom. Was that intentional? Had the Alpha Legion created Mirror Prime not to infiltrate the Dark Angels, but to articulate arguments that the chapter needed to hear, but would never accept if they came from one of their own? Azrael returned to his seat, his expression troubled. The Inner Circle has debated these questions for centuries, Mirror Prime. We know the cost of secrecy. We know the burden it places on every brother who learns the truth. But we also know the cost of revelation would be higher. If the Imperium learned about the Fallen, if other chapters discovered that the First Legion was corrupted, then you'd be judged, Mirror Prime interrupted. You'd be held accountable for your failures. You'd face consequences for 10,000 years of deception. And that terrifies you more than the slow dissolution of your chapter's soul. Enough, Azrael commanded, his voice sharp. You are a prisoner here, not a counselor. Your insights are noted, but they carry no weight in our deliberations. Mirror Prime smiled, a sad expression that seemed ancient despite his young face. I am more than a prisoner, Supreme Grand Master. I am a mirror, and when you look at me, you see what the Dark Angels have become, a hybrid of honor and shame, a fusion of loyalty and deception, something that cannot decide what it truly is, because acknowledging that would require choosing one over the other. Take him to the cells, Azrael ordered. 2 Deathwing Terminators moved forward to escort Mirror Prime from the chamber. As they led him toward the exit, the hybrid Marine looked back at Raphen. You tried, Brother Captain, he said quietly. You saw the truth, or something close to it, and you tried to make them listen. But some prisons are more comfortable than freedom. Some lies feel safer than the truth. The Dark Angels will not change because they were changed once before, on Caliban, and they've spent 10 millennia trying to prevent it from happening again. Then he was gone, and Raphen was alone before the Inner Circle. Brother Captain Raphen, Azrael said formally, we have reached a decision regarding your strike force and your mission to Aethelion IX. Raphen straightened, preparing himself for whatever judgment came next. Your loyalty is not in question. Your service remains exemplary. However, your exposure to the Alpha Legion's neural manipulation technology presents an ongoing security concern. Therefore, you and every member of your strike force will undergo memory reconditioning. The events on Aethelion IX will be edited from your recall, replaced with a standard reconnaissance mission. You will remember investigating a dead Mechanicus world, finding nothing of significance and returning to the rock. You're going to erase our memories. Raphen couldn't keep the horror from his voice. Everything we learned, everything we experienced, will be preserved in the Inner Circle's archives, Azrael assured him. Your testimony has been recorded, the evidence you collected has been secured, nothing will be lost, but you, personally, will not retain those memories. It's the only way to ensure the Alpha Legion's conditioning doesn't activate at some future point. This is wrong, Raphen said, but he could already see the determination in Azrael's eyes. The decision had been made. Nothing he said would change it. You're proving Mirror Prime's point. You're choosing comfortable lies over uncomfortable truth. We're choosing to protect our brothers from manipulation, Azrael corrected. The Alpha Legion wants you to retain these memories, wants you to spread doubt and suspicion throughout the chapter. By removing them, we deny them that victory. Or, Raphen countered, by removing them, you deny yourselves the chance to learn from them, to adapt, to change before change is forced upon you. Azrael's expression softened slightly. Perhaps, but that's a risk the Inner Circle has decided not to take, not yet. Maybe someday, when the chapter is stronger, when the threat of the Fallen is finally resolved, we can afford to embrace transparency, but not today, not when we're still hunting shadows from our past. Raphen wanted to argue further, wanted to rage against the decision, to demand they listen to his warnings. But he was tired of uncertainty, tired of doubt, tired of seeing his own face staring back at him from a dozen different reflections, each one claiming to be real. When? He asked quietly. When will the reconditioning happen? Immediately, the chaplains are standing by. You'll wake tomorrow morning believing you've just returned from a standard mission. Your strike force will be reassigned to different companies to prevent cross-contamination of any residual memories, and this conversation will be sealed in the Inner Circle's archives, accessible only to those who need to know. And what about Mirror Prime? What happens to him? He'll be kept in isolation, studied by our apothecaries and janitors. Perhaps someday we'll understand how the hybridization was accomplished and develop countermeasures. Until then, he remains evidence, a reminder of what the Alpha Legion attempted and what we prevented. Raphen looked around the Chamber of Judgment one last time, trying to memorize the faces of the Inner Circle, the weight of this moment, the horror of having truth taken away. Tomorrow, he wouldn't remember any of this. Tomorrow, Aethelion IX would be nothing but a designation on a mission log, remarkable only for how unremarkable it was. I want to make one final statement, Raphen said, for the record, for the archives, for whoever reads this transcript centuries from now. Azrael nodded. Speak. The Alpha Legion isn't your greatest enemy. Your greatest enemy is yourself, your secrecy, your shame, your refusal to trust your own brothers with the truth of your own history. Someday that will destroy you, not through infiltration or corruption, but through the slow erosion of everything that makes the Dark Angels worth being. And when that day comes, remember that you were warned. Remember that brothers came back from Aethelion IX trying to save you, and you chose to forget them rather than listen. Silence. Then Azrael spoke, his voice heavy with sorrow. Your statement is noted and will be preserved. Now, Brother Captain, it's time. The interrogator chaplains moved forward, their hands carrying neural inhibitors and memory editing equipment. Raphen didn't resist. There was no point. The decision had been made by authorities higher than himself, and he was still a Dark Angel, still bound by duty and oath. As the devices attached to his temples and the chemicals began flooding his system, he felt his memories starting to blur. Aethelion IX is fading. The data core is becoming indistinct. Mirror Prime's face dissolves into fog. His last coherent thought before the reconditioning took hold was a question. Had this happened before? Had he undergone this same procedure after previous missions to Aethelion IX, each time having his memories erased, each time forgetting he'd ever tried to save the chapter from itself? Was he caught in an endless cycle, doomed to discover the truth and lose it over and over, across centuries or even millennia? Then the thought was gone. replaced by a simpler memory, a standard reconnaissance mission, a dead Mechanicus world, nothing of significance, return to the rock. Brother Captain Raphen slept and dreamed of ashes. What victory did the Alpha Legion claim when truth itself became a weapon that could be wielded and forgotten in equal measure? And was there any escape from a prison built inside one's own mind? Haunted memories. But memories, even erased ones, leave echoes. Brother Captain Raphen woke in his quarters aboard the rock, feeling as though he'd forgotten something important. The sensation was familiar. He'd experienced it before, though he couldn't quite remember when. It was like trying to recall a dream that had fled the moment consciousness returned, leaving only the emotional residue of significance without substance. He checked his chronometer. He'd been back from the Aethelion IX reconnaissance mission for 3 days. Standard post-mission recovery time, though he couldn't recall anything about the mission that would have required it. Just a dead Mechanicus world, ash storms, and nothing of significance. So why did he feel haunted? Raphen went through his morning rituals, prayers to the Emperor, weapons maintenance, and review of company logs. Everything seemed normal. Everything was as it should be. Yet the feeling of wrongness persisted, like an itch he couldn't scratch, a memory he couldn't quite access. During morning chapel service, he found himself staring at interrogator Chaplain Asmodai, trying to remember something about ash and servitors chanting in voices that shouldn't exist. But the memory dissolved before he could grasp it, leaving only unease. At the tactical briefing, he noticed Sergeant Malchior watching him. Concern, suspicion, both. When Raphen caught his eye, Malchior quickly looked away, as if afraid of what he might see. Were they avoiding each other? Had something happened on Aethelion IX that neither could remember but both somehow knew? 3 days after waking from what the medical logs called standard post-mission recovery, Raphen was summoned to the Fortress Monastery's deep archive, a sector he'd only visited a handful of times in 400 years. The message came directly from Supreme Grand Master Azrael, marked with inner circle authorization codes. He found Azrael waiting in a chamber lined with data vaults containing millennia of classified information. The Supreme Grand Master looked older than Raphen remembered, as if some great weight had settled on his shoulders recently. "Brother Captain," Azrael greeted him. "Thank you for coming. What I am about to show you exists outside official records. You will not speak of it to anyone outside this room. Understood?" "Understood, Supreme Grand Master." Azrael activated a data terminal, and a hololithic display materialized between them. It showed Aethelion IX, not the dead ash-choked world Raphen barely remembered, but as it had been centuries ago. A thriving forge world, factories glowing with heat, orbital stations bustling with transport craft. "This is Aethelion IX before the catastrophe," Azrael explained. "A Mechanicus research facility specializing in gene seed studies. They were attempting to optimize the implantation process, reduce rejection rates, and create more stable space marine candidates." "I know this," Raphen said slowly. "We included it in the mission briefing before deployment." "Did we?" Azrael's expression was unreadable. "Or do you only think we did because your edited memories suggest it?" The words hit Raphen like a bolt round to the chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that 3 days ago, you stood in the chamber of judgment and made a final statement. A warning to the inner circle about the cost of secrecy. You told us we were our own worst enemies. Then you underwent memory reconditioning, and those events were removed from your recall." Raphen felt his world tilting. "Then why tell me now? Why bring me here to reveal what you deliberately made me forget?" "Because something has changed." Azrael advanced the hololithic display, showing recent data. 2 days after your reconditioning, we received a transmission from Aethelion IX. The same transmission that brought you there in the first place. The truth burns beneath. But this time, it included something additional. The display showed an audio file. Azrael played it. Raphen heard his own voice, speaking words he didn't remember saying. Brother Captain Raphen reporting. If you're receiving this, then my memories have been edited, and I've forgotten what I'm about to tell you. Listen carefully. Everything the Inner Circle told you about Aethelion IX is both true and false. The Alpha Legion infiltration is real. The gene seed experiments created something that shouldn't exist, and I chose to have my memories erased because keeping them would have destroyed me. But I also set up this transmission to activate after the reconditioning, because some truths are too important to forget completely. Trust your instincts. Remember that you fought for something on Aethelion IX. Remember that you tried to save the chapter, and whatever you do, don't let them erase you again. The transmission ended. Raphen stared at the hololithic display. He had sent himself a message, knowing his memories would be erased, knowing he'd forget everything, but determined that some part of the truth would survive. How? He managed. How did I transmit this if I was undergoing reconditioning? You didn't. Or rather, you did. But the transmission was delayed. You set it up before the reconditioning, with a timer to activate days later. We only discovered it when our astropaths detected the outgoing signal. By then, it had already been sent. Azrael's expression was troubled. You were clever, Brother Captain. Even knowing we'd erase your memories, you found a way to preserve some fragment of the truth. Mirror Prime's vision. The vault door opened, revealing a Medici chamber beyond. Mirror Prime lay on a table surrounded by monitoring equipment, his body covered in tubes and sensors. His mismatched eyes seemed to be fading, green and blue, dull, lifeless. When he saw Raphen enter, something like relief crossed his face. Brother Captain, he whispered. I wasn't sure if you'd remember, even with the edited memories. I don't, Raphen admitted. But Supreme Grandmaster Azrael says you have something important to tell me. Yes, Mirror Prime said weakly. I saw the Dark Angel's future. Multiple timelines, probability branches. Most of them lead to destruction. But a few, very few, would survive. How? Choice. Genuine choice. The Dark Angels must reveal their secrets before they are exposed. Choose trust over suspicion, honesty over false strength. Raphen thought about memory reconditioning, Malchior avoiding his gaze, and the creeping paranoia. Mirror Prime was right. The chapter was already destroying itself from within. Azrael stepped forward. We convene the full Inner Circle, every company master, every interrogator chaplain, every member who has earned the right to know our deepest secrets. We present Mirror Prime's testimony. We present Brother Captain Raphen's arguments, and we vote. Do we continue 10,000 years of secrecy, or do we choose a new path? You would let a single vote determine the chapter's future, Asmodai demanded. Then we live with the consequences, Azrael said firmly, or die with them. But at least it will be our choice, made consciously, with full knowledge. Raphen looked at Mirror Prime, at Azrael, at himself. He took a deep breath. Yes, he said. I can argue for truth, even without remembering all the evidence. Because some things don't need to be remembered. They just need to be felt. And I feel in every fiber of my being that the Dark Angels are dying. Not from Alpha Legion infiltration, not from external enemies, but from the poison of our own secrecy. If we don't choose to change, we will destroy ourselves more thoroughly than any enemy ever could. Mirror Prime smiled, weak but genuine. Then there's hope, not certainty, but hope, and sometimes that's enough. His mismatched eyes closed. His breathing stopped. The hybrid was dead, but his final testimony would survive. And the chapter would have to decide 10,000 years of tradition or a new path forward. Azrael's voice broke the silence. Prepare the chamber of judgment. Summon every member of the inner circle. What happens next will determine whether the dark angels have a future at all. The chamber of judgment had never held so many warriors. Every company master, every interrogator chaplain, every member of the Deathwing's inner circle, nearly 100 space marines, each one bearing the burden of knowing the chapter's darkest secret. They stood in concentric circles around the central floor, where Raphen and Asmodai would present their cases, their power armor making them look like statues carved from jade and bone. Supreme Grandmaster Azrael sat at the head of the Calibanite oak table, his expression grave. Beside him sat the other members of the chapter's highest command: Ezekiel, Grandmaster of Librarians; Saphon, Master of Sanctity; Belial, Grandmaster of the Deathwing, and others whose names carried centuries of authority. Brothers, Azrael began, his voice resonating through the chamber. We are here to make a choice that will define the Dark Angels for the next 10,000 years. The question before us is simple. Do we continue hiding the truth of the fallen, or do we reveal our shame to the Imperium and face whatever judgment comes? There is nothing simple about that question, Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai countered immediately. What Supreme Grandmaster Azrael presents as a binary choice is actually a decision between honor and annihilation, between maintaining the respect the Dark Angels have earned through 10 millennia of loyal service, or destroying that respect through an admission of ancient treachery. Speak your case, Chaplain, Azrael gestured. Remind us why we chose secrecy. Asmodai moved to the center of the chamber, his skull-faced helm catching the harsh lighting. When he spoke, his voice carried the fervor of absolute conviction. 10,000 years ago, our legion fell to civil war. Brother fought brother. Sons of the Lion turned against their Primarch. Half our legion became traitors, and the rest of us have spent millennia hunting them through the darkness, trying to restore what was broken. This is our shame. This is our burden. But it is not just our shame. If we reveal the truth of the fallen, we reveal that the First Legion, the Emperor's Chosen, the original Space Marines, the template upon which all other chapters were based, was corrupted. We reveal that chaos can touch even the most loyal, that betrayal can spring from the most devoted hearts. And in revealing that, we undermine faith in all Space Marines. Every chapter will be questioned. Every Marine will be a suspect. The Imperium will look at its greatest defenders and wonder, if the Dark Angels could fall, if the First Legion could betray, then what about the others? What about the Blood Angels with their red thirst? The Space Wolves with their savage nature? The Black Templars with their zealotry? Once we open this door, once we admit that Space Marines can be corrupted, there is no closing it again. And what do we gain? Honesty, transparency. These are luxuries the Imperium cannot afford. The citizens of the Imperium need to believe their protectors are incorruptible. They need to have faith that when Space Marines arrive to defend their worlds, those Marines are absolutely loyal. If we take that faith away, if we reveal that even the First Legion can fall, we weaken the Imperium's ability to resist the horrors that assail it from all sides. We keep our secrets not out of pride, but out of duty, not to protect ourselves, but to protect the Imperium from a truth it cannot bear. The shame is ours to carry. The burden is ours to endure. That is what it means to be Dark Angels. That is what it has always meant. Asmodai's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of 10,000 years of tradition. Raphen could see them resonating with many of the assembled inner circle members, the older brothers, the ones who had lived with this secret for centuries, who had internalized the logic of secrecy so thoroughly that it had become indistinguishable from faith. But he also saw doubt on other faces, younger company masters, brothers who had only recently been inducted into the inner circle and still remembered what it felt like to be on the outside, to sense that their chapter was hiding something, but not know what. "Brother Captain Raphen," Azrael called, "present your case." Raphen moved to the center of the chamber, acutely aware that he couldn't remember most of the evidence that had brought him to this position. He didn't remember Mirror Prime's full testimony, didn't remember the archive, didn't remember experiencing the data core's uploaded memories. All he had was the edited version of events, the instinct that something was deeply wrong, and the transcript of words he'd spoken before his memories were erased. But sometimes, instinct was enough. "Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai asks us to maintain secrecy out of duty," Raphen began. "He argues that we hide the truth to protect the Imperium's faith in its defenders. But I ask you, whose faith are we really protecting? The Imperium's or our own? We tell ourselves we keep secrets for noble reasons, that we hunt the fallen to preserve the chapter's honor, that we hide our shame to protect the greater good. But look at what that secrecy has done to us. Look at what we've become. We don't trust each other. Even here, in the inner circle, surrounded by brothers who have earned the right to know our deepest secrets, we wonder who might be compromised. We undergo genetic verification after every mission that seems unusual. We erase memories when someone discovers something that contradicts our official narrative. We've created a culture where doubt is doctrine and paranoia is virtue, and it's getting worse. Each generation of Dark Angels carries a heavier burden than the last. Each century, we become more isolated, more suspicious, more willing to do terrible things in the service of maintaining a lie that's 10,000 years old. Where does it end? At what point does our obsession with hiding our shame become more destructive than the shame itself? The Alpha Legion understands this. That's why they don't need to infiltrate us with sleeper agents or hybrid marines. They just need to remind us what we already are, a chapter eating itself alive through secrecy. We're doing their work for them. Every memory we erase, every brother we execute for knowing too much, every world we allow to burn because we were too busy hunting fallen to defend the citizens we swore to protect. Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai says revelation would undermine faith in Space Marines. But I say our secrecy is already doing that. Other chapters suspect us. The Inquisition watches us closely. The High Lords question why we're never where we're needed most, why our fleet is always pursuing some classified mission we can't discuss. We've sacrificed credibility for secrecy, and we've gained nothing from the trade except our own slow dissolution. There is another path. We reveal the truth about the fallen. We admit that our legion fell to civil war 10,000 years ago, and that we've been hiding it ever since. We face the tribunal, accept the punishment, and endure the restrictions. And then we rebuild. Not as a chapter built on lies, but as a chapter built on redemption. We prove that honor isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest, about admitting your failures and working to overcome them. Will it be painful? Yes. Will we lose respect in the short term? Probably. Will some brothers refuse to accept the change and must be addressed? Certainly. But the alternative is what we're doing now. Dying slowly, corroding from within, becoming so obsessed with maintaining appearances that we forget what we're supposed to be. I don't remember everything that happened on Aethelion IX. My memories were edited, stolen from me by the same culture of secrecy I'm asking us to abandon. But I know this. I came back from that world convinced that change was necessary. so convinced that I set up a transmission to remind myself even after reconditioning. And if past me was willing to go to those lengths, if I was so certain that revelation was the only path forward that I tried to preserve that conviction beyond memory itself, then I have to trust that judgment. I have to believe that version of myself saw something I can no longer consciously recall, but that remains true nonetheless. The truth burns beneath, not beneath Aethelion IX's surface, beneath our armor, beneath our traditions, beneath everything we pretend to be, and the only way to extinguish that fire is to bring it into the light. Raphen's words echoed through the chamber of judgment. He couldn't tell if they'd had any effect. The assembled inner circle remained silent, impassive, their faces giving nothing away. Finally, Grandmaster Ezekiel spoke. As chief librarian, his words carried special weight. He could sense the currents of the warp, could perceive truths hidden from normal perception. "I have looked into possible futures," Ezekiel said quietly. "Used my abilities to glimpse the paths that branch from this moment. And I see what the hybrid abomination Mirror Prime claimed to see. In most timelines, we continue as we are, hunting fallen, maintaining secrets, growing ever more isolated until we're barely recognizable as a Space Marine chapter. In a few timelines, we choose revelation. And yes, we suffer for it. We are punished, restricted, and watched. But we survive. Damaged perhaps, but still capable of serving. Still able to call ourselves loyal sons of the Emperor. And which timeline leads to the Imperium's greater good? Asmodai demanded. That's what should matter. Not our survival, but humanity's protection. That's the question I cannot answer, Ezekiel admitted, because both paths lead to uncertain outcomes. If we maintain secrecy and our chapter slowly dissolves, will other forces step in to fill the void we leave? If we choose revelation and face punishment, will we still be capable of defending the Imperium during our period of restriction? The warp shows possibilities, not certainties. And in this case, it shows that both choices carry risk. Supreme Grandmaster Azrael stood. Then we must choose not based on certainty, but on principle. What kind of chapter do we want to be? What values do we want to define us? Those questions have answers even when the tactical outcomes remain unclear. He looked around the chamber of judgment, meeting the eyes of every inner circle member. It is time to vote, not as commanders or masters, but as brothers, as dark angels who must live with the consequences of this decision. The question is simple. Do we reveal the truth about the fallen, or do we continue the policy of secrecy that has defined us for 10,000 years? All who favor revelation, step forward. Raphen stepped forward immediately. He was joined by several younger company masters, brothers who had been inducted into the inner circle recently enough to still remember the pain of deception. A few interrogator chaplains, some Deathwing veterans who had spent centuries hunting fallen and were tired of the chase, but not many. Perhaps 20 out of nearly 100. All who favor maintaining secrecy step forward. Asmodai led this group, joined by the older chaplains, the traditional company masters, the brothers who had spent so long carrying the burden of shame that they couldn't imagine setting it down. Perhaps 50 warriors. That left 30 who hadn't moved, standing in the middle ground, undecided. Brothers who abstain, Azrael called. You must choose. This decision is too important to avoid. One of the undecided stepped forward, Brother Boreas, a company master nearly as old as Asmodai. I abstain not because I lack conviction, but because I believe both positions have merit. I've spent 4 centuries keeping this secret, believing it protected the Imperium, but I've also watched our chapter grow more paranoid, more isolated, more willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of maintaining a lie. I cannot choose between these options, because I genuinely don't know which is right. Then how do we proceed? Another undecided brother asked. If 30 of us cannot choose, does that mean we default to the status quo? Azrael shook his head. No, it means we need more information, more evidence, more. No, Raphen interrupted. Respectfully, Supreme Grandmaster, that's what we always say. We need more information, more time, more certainty before we can change. But more information won't help. This isn't a tactical decision that can be solved with better intelligence. This is a moral choice, a question of identity. And those kinds of questions can only be answered by looking inward, not outward. Then what do you suggest? Azrael asked. Raphen thought for a moment. Then an idea came to him. Audacious, possibly heretical, but perhaps the only way to break the deadlock. Let me return to Aethelion IX, without reconditioning this time. Let me experience whatever is there without having my memories edited afterward. And when I return, I'll present complete testimony about what I found, not fragments, not edited versions, everything. Then the inner circle can vote again with full knowledge of what we're facing. That's insane, Asmodai said flatly. You've already been compromised by the Alpha Legion's neural conditioning. Sending you back would only deepen that corruption. Perhaps the only way to know the truth is to stop editing it, to stop sanitizing our own memories because we're afraid of what we might learn. Azrael was silent, considering. Finally he spoke. The undecided brothers. If Brother Captain Raphen returns to Aethelion IX, experiences whatever is there without reconditioning, and comes back with complete testimony, would that information help you make a decision? One by one, the 30 undecided brothers nodded. Then it's settled, Azrael decided. Brother Captain Raphen, you will return to Aethelion IX. You will investigate without memory editing. You will document everything you find. And when you return, we will convene the inner circle again and vote. But understand this, if you come back obviously corrupted, if the Alpha Legion's conditioning has turned you into something we can't trust, we will have no choice but to execute you. Can you accept those terms? Raphen felt fear, genuine, visceral fear of the kind he hadn't experienced since his earliest days as a scout. He'd be going alone to a world that had corrupted or killed every dark angel who'd investigated it. He'd be deliberately exposing himself to Alpha Legion manipulation without the safety net of memory reconditioning to undo the damage afterward. He might return as something no longer recognizably himself, but if it meant breaking the deadlock, if it meant forcing the chapter to finally make a real choice instead of continuing to delay. I accept, he said. What final truths awaited on that ash-choked world? And would the captain who returned be the same one who departed? Or would Aethelion IX claim another soul in its eternal cycle of revelation and corruption? 3 weeks later, Brother Captain Raphen stood once more on the ash-choked surface of Aethelion IX. This time, he was alone. No strike force, no Deathwing Terminators, just himself, his power armor, and the certainty that whatever he learned here would change everything. The transmission still broadcast endlessly. The truth burns beneath. The truth burns beneath. The truth burns beneath. But now he understood what it meant. Not a warning, not a threat, an invitation. The truth burned beneath lies, beneath traditions, beneath armor, beneath oaths, beneath centuries of accumulated shame. The only way to reach it was to descend into that fire and let it consume everything false. He made his way to Manufactorum Prime. The ruins were silent. The servitors no longer chanted their blasphemous litanies. It was as if Aethelion IX knew he had returned and waited. Pause. The data core stood where he left it, pulsing with stored memories. Raphen did not hesitate. He pressed his forehead against the neural interface and felt the probes burrow into his skull. This time, he did not resist. He let it all in, every timeline, every possibility, every version of himself that had made different choices. He experienced being Cyrus, dying in this chamber 84 years ago. He experienced being Mirror Prime, trapped in a body that could not decide what it was. He experienced being Alpharius, planning strategies that spanned millennia. He experienced himself, across dozens of iterations, each time discovering the truth and having it stolen. And through it all, one thing became clear. The cycle could end, but only if he chose to end it. Raphen pulled himself from the interface. His mind reeled from the weight of accumulated knowledge. He stumbled to the archive vault and found it open, waiting. The Raphen copies were there, dozens of them, all watching him with expressions ranging from hope to despair. "You came back," one said. "Again." "I know," Raphen replied. "I've seen it now, all the times I've been here. All the times I've tried to save the chapter. All the times I've failed." "Not failed," another copy corrected. "Delayed. Each iteration pushes the inner circle closer to the moment of choice. Each cycle makes revelation more inevitable. You're not trying to succeed in one attempt. You're trying to succeed across infinite attempts, and you're getting close." "How close?" "This might be it. This might be the iteration where they finally choose correctly, or it might not. But either way, you have to give them the chance." Raphen looked at his own faces, at all the versions of himself that had stood in this place before him. What happens if they choose wrong? If they vote to continue the secrecy? The copies smiled sadly. "Then you return here again, in another few decades, when the transmission starts broadcasting once more. And we do this all over again, until they get it right, until the Dark Angels choose truth before truth destroys them." "That's horrifying." "Yes, but it's also hopeful, because it means they still have a chance. As long as brothers like you keep trying, keep returning, keep pushing for change, there's hope. The cycle doesn't have to be eternal. It just has to continue until they're ready to break it." Raphen spent 3 more days on Aethelion IX, documenting everything. He recorded testimony from the archive's copies, downloaded data files from Mechanicus experiments, catalogued evidence of Alpha Legion infiltration attempts, and wrote a comprehensive report synthesizing everything he'd learned across multiple iterations. When he finally boarded the Thunder Hawk for return to the Rock, he carried with him the most complete record of Aethelion, the 9th secrets that any Dark Angel had ever compiled, unedited, unfiltered, uncorrupted. Supreme Grandmaster Azrael met him at the landing bay, studying him carefully. "You look different, brother captain. Changed." "I am changed," Raphen acknowledged. "I know things I shouldn't. Remember events from timelines I didn't experience. The data core's upload has altered me. I'm not entirely sure I'm still the same Raphen who left 3 weeks ago." "Are you compromised?" "Probably, but not in the way you mean. The Alpha Legion didn't turn me into their agent. They turned me into someone who understands both sides of this conflict so thoroughly that I can't pretend the answer is simple anymore. I've experienced what it means to hunt fallen across centuries. I've felt the weight of shame that drives our secrecy, but I've also seen what that secrecy costs, what it's turning us into." "And what is your recommendation?" Raphen pulled out the data slate containing his complete report. "I recommend we convene the inner circle again. I'll present everything I've learned, and then I'll abstain from the vote." Azrael's eyebrows rose. "Abstain? But you were the strongest voice for revelation." I was. But I've learned something on Aethelion IX. This choice can't be made by someone outside the system arguing for change. It has to be made by the system itself, choosing to evolve. I can provide information. I can testify. But the actual decision has to come from brothers who haven't had their perspective altered by Alpha Legion neural technology. Otherwise, we're just replacing one form of manipulation with another. You've become wise in 3 weeks, Brother Captain. Or perhaps, you've finally understood what all your previous iterations were trying to learn. 2 days later, the Chamber of Judgment filled again. This time, Raphen's testimony lasted 8 hours. He presented every piece of evidence, every memory, every argument he could construct. He showed them the archive's copies, explained the cycle of discovery and erasure, detailed how the Alpha Legion had built Aethelion IX as a mirror, reflecting what the Dark Angels most needed and most feared to see. When he finished, the chamber was silent for a long time. Finally, Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai spoke. Even if everything you've presented is accurate, even if the Alpha Legion's manipulation is as sophisticated as you describe, the fundamental question remains, is revelation worth the cost? Would the Dark Angels survive the punishment that would follow? Would the Imperium be better served by our honest weakness or our dishonest strength? I don't know, Raphen admitted. I can only tell you what I've learned. Secrecy is killing us incrementally. Revelation would wound us all at once. Which death is preferable? That's what you have to decide. Votes were cast. Deadlock. Perfectly split. Neither secrecy nor revelation held a clear majority. Azrael looked around the chamber, his expression weighed down by 10,000 years of command. We are divided, nearly evenly, and perhaps that is the answer itself. What do you mean? Brother Boreas asked. We stop pretending this is a decision that can be made once and forever. We stop choosing between absolute secrecy and complete revelation. Instead, we choose incrementalism. We begin gradually revealing information, first to other chapters, in classified briefings, then to the Inquisition, in controlled circumstances, eventually to the wider Imperium. Emphasis. Azrael outlined the first step, the Ultramarines. Chapter Master Calgar would be the first to know. The circle of knowledge would expand, one chapter at a time, one decade at a time. Raphen supported the incremental approach. He provided information, testified, and abstained from the vote, allowing the system to choose. Not all brothers agreed, but enough did. The Dark Angels would begin the long process of revealing their shame. Slowly, carefully, deliberately. 50 years later, Chapter Master Marneus Calgar of the Ultramarines sat with Azrael. They reviewed 10,000 years of fallen history. Calgar promised to form a council of trusted chapter masters to help navigate the gradual revelation. Azrael felt hope, genuine hope, for the first time in centuries. 100 years later, the transmission from Aethelion IX finally stopped. The ash storms continued. The ruins slowly collapsed. But Brother Captain Raphen, now approaching his 6th century of service, believed the transmission had stopped because it was no longer needed. The Dark Angels had seen themselves, and they had chosen change. Raphen pulled up an old file, his testimony from a century ago. He read his own words and whispered, "We did it. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but we did it. We broke the cycle. The Dark Angels are changing." The truth no longer burned beneath. It stood in the light, still painful, still difficult, but no longer hidden. The Dark Angels, the First Legion, the unforgiven, began the long work of forgiving themselves. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Pause. But within that war, there are choices. Small ones. Incremental ones. Choices that compound across centuries until they transform everything. The Dark Angels learned this the hardest way possible, through cycles of discovery and erasure, through brothers who sacrificed memories to preserve truth, through millennia of shame that could have been avoided if honesty had been chosen at the start. They learned it nonetheless, and in learning it, they became something the Imperium desperately needed. Proof that even the fallen could rise again, even the corrupted could cleanse themselves, even those who had lied for 10,000 years could choose truth. The horror was not in the corruption itself, but in the response to hide rather than heal, to conceal rather than confess, to maintain appearances rather than pursue authenticity. Aethelion IX had forced them to look at themselves, and they chose to look directly. The secrets remained. The fallen still walked among the stars. The shame would never completely fade, but it no longer defined them. They were more than their worst moments, more than their greatest failures, more than the lies they had maintained. Pause. They were the Dark Angels, the First Legion, the unforgiven, choosing to forgive themselves. Not perfect, not pure, but honest. And sometimes, in the grim darkness of the far future, honesty is the most revolutionary act of all. For the lion, for the emperor, for the truth that burns beneath all lies. And so the echoes of this war fade back into the endless dark. Another chapter sealed in blood. Another warning carved into the carcass of a dying age. But the void is never silent for long. There are always more horrors lurking between the stars, more crusades, more betrayals, more nightmares waiting to be unleashed upon the foolish and the brave alike. If you would continue walking these forgotten paths, if you would stare into the abyss with eyes unflinching, then remain with us. Subscribe to Voidborn Terrors, where every tale is torn from the galaxy's open wounds, and every ending is only the beginning of another descent. Until the next story drags itself from the void. Survive. Few ever do.